everyone. Welcome to another session of Exploration Tech. I always say I'm excited, and now I feel like I'm always saying I'm always excited. But we secured someone who has his own very successful podcast, does a lot of opportunities for this avenue in terms of marketing, and very experienced in the ERP space. Really looking forward to our conversation today with Sam Gupta. As always, my name is Jared Heckler. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Brilliance. I've been with Brilliance for a little over 5 years, and what I love about what we do is helping these organizations that we're going to speak to specifically today, the manufacturers and distributors, helping them understand technology to make it work for them and their business. I'll keep my intro short and pass it to Lori to introduce herself.
Yes, I am excited about our conversation today, and a little bit about me before I pass it over to Sam. I started Brilliance in 1998. My background's in computer electrical engineering. I went to school at Purdue and ended up through an internship at NASA Johnson Space Center, where I eventually worked as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. That was a ton of fun, a great experience. I ended up meeting my husband there. He also was an engineering student at Purdue. And actually, eventually, while he worked as a flight controller at NASA, eventually he went to work for Rockwell Automation. And it was through that he had a promotion to Rockwell's headquarters in Milwaukee that we relocated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1998. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And so I decided to start a web development company. And with my husband Dave's experience at Rockwell managing their largest data warehouse with their distributors, we realized we were uniquely equipped to work in digital implementations for manufacturers and distributors that involved more complex data integrations and really served the B2B market. And so that became our niche, and our focus is supporting manufacturers and distributors in digital commerce. And we've grown. My husband left Rockwell 10 years ago, and now he leads our development team. And I'm really excited about the conversation that we're having today. Sam, you and I met through some common LinkedIn connections, through some common people we know, and we both have some shared values around educating companies, providing content that really helps them think through how to make good decisions, like what the positions they're at in the market. I've just been so impressed. You've invited me to be a part of some of the things you're doing. I'm so honored to have you here with us today. So I'd love to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm happy to. But before I introduce myself, Lori, I am going to have an apology to you. I knew that when I invited you to my show, I knew that the table was going to be churned one of these days. I knew that I was a little mean to you, okay, on my show. And today's your turn, okay?
Oh, it's my turn.
So I hope you are going to be a little nicer to me. I'm hoping that. All right, guys, about me. So I'm Sam Gupta. I work with brilliant people like Lori and Jared, and part of this e-commerce ERP ecosystem. And my background is really working with Fortune 500 companies with their digital transformation journey. So I sort of am a guy who connects things together when it comes to implementing different systems, aligning the architecture and the roadmap for the companies. From the company perspective, we are involved in a lot of pre-ERP, pre-e-commerce engagement. And that is going to be super important before you implement the technology, because you need to figure out your physical processes first before you can implement any technology. The biggest mistake that most businesses do is they feel, you know what, if I'm constructing a house, what I need to do is I simply need to get hold of the contractor, lay out the bricks, and my home is going to be ready. You know how that goes if you try to be an architect yourself. Okay, so that's our value prop overall from the business perspective. We like to call ourselves as more of the enterprise or the business architect. We have very exciting community. WBS rocks. We do a lot of LinkedIn live shows ourselves, really educating manufacturers, distributors in value of technology, how to implement technology, so that you can get the real ROI. We also have a podcast. We have done roughly 100 episodes. We just released our 100th episode, by the way, yesterday, which is, quite an accomplishment. That's what we feel. So that's about me, Laurie.
That's fantastic. And I'd like to echo, highly recommend you follow Sam and all the content that he's creating on LinkedIn. connect with him directly through there. It's wonderful content, very eye-opening, and I'd highly recommend looking into it. A couple other housekeeping items. If you also get a minute, we're continuing to work on creating as much content as we can as well, and we'd love for you to give us a follow there. So you referenced in your intro, you are skilled in working with business executives, and we all know business executives have a different mindset when it comes to these ERP and e-commerce sites and what they want to accomplish with it compared to someone who's working in the business. They're really focused on the business. Can you share what's important for a business executive when it comes to these ERP and e-commerce sites working together?
I would say the biggest objective of overall any technology engagement or the transformation is going to be, as you correctly pointed out, that there is always going to be a divide in the business, just because the way the businesses are structured traditionally. If you look at the genesis of any business, they sort of start very siloed. Initially, when they are going to start, they are going to have a founder. That founder is probably going to do everything, but slowly and gradually what they are going to do is they are going to build these silos, because it's very hard to find people who are going to know, let's say, marketing as well as finance. It's very hard to know, find people who is going to know sales as well as operations. So what you do is you hire a bunch of experts who are going to be expert of the specific departments, but that's how your organization is going to be structured, okay, as the pillar. So now when you get into the scaling part, now a scaling part requires this cross-functional alignment and the collaboration. So when you talk about the executives who are very focused externally, obviously they need to please the customers, and customers don't care whether you are pleasing me through sales, whether you are pleasing me through marketing, whether you are pleasing me through your operational excellence in serving the product that I care for, or you are really pleasing me from your financial services that you are providing. For the customers, what they need is the seamless experience. And that you cannot provide unless you all can come together as one organization, treat your organization as the system, and create the technology infrastructure that is also going to help you create that seamless experience inside the organization.
What I love, Sam, about your point is just really understanding the importance of it being a holistic approach. Certainly, we've heard that from our customers. On our customer advisory board, they talked about really some of the differences that they saw after improving their digital on the whole, was that they created an improved experience for their customer, which at the end of the day, that's what you want. And to really pull that off, that really requires you have technology systems that work together well. And sometimes I think because of organizations can think in silos, some really important things get missed. If we think about how that the business can work together well with a cross-functional team, if an organization moves to having a centralized accounting, integrated business system where they have a central source of truth, like how does that assist them in making better business decisions or in better serving customers?
So that's a great question, and I am actually going to answer it in, again, slightly more in the philosophical sense. And I don't know if I'm going to make sense here, but most of my answers are going to be like that. Okay.
Sure.
So when you don't have that cross-functional insight, one of the things, if you're purely looking from the customer experience perspective, let's say if you are exploring any sort of e-commerce, you are doing any sort of direct to consumer. One of the recent trends that you are seeing in the market, for example, let's talk about click and collect experience. For example, when you talk about buy online, pick up at store experience. Okay, again, when you are doing e-commerce, you want to explore all of these crazy scenarios because that is your competitive advantage. That's what consumers really want in the market at this point of time. When you look at B2B, in case of B2B as well, what they are looking for is their ability to be able to research and to be able to find things by themselves, as opposed to somebody coming to them and being very salesy. That is something nobody appreciates. So they are looking for a very educational journey overall. Now, how do you create that educational journey? You will not be able to create that unless you have that cross-functional alignment inside the organization. If your inventory is not going to be centralized, okay, that is always the biggest problem. How are you going to forecast your demand? How are you going to make sure that when your customers are going to be there, you have a product for them. How are you going to allocate the products for your key customer so that what your sales reps are not going to do? And I can share some stories if you allow me to do that. That can go in a little detail. But the biggest challenges that we see in the market, when it comes to the growing pains are always going to be related to, I don't have the centralized inventory. And just because I don't have the centralized inventory, I cannot really serve my key customers. I cannot serve my my retail customers, because when they order, then I don't have an order that I can ship. My loyalty is not really centralized, because when your customer is going to come to the e-commerce portal, e-commerce is going to maintain the loyalty. But where is that loyalty when I walk to the store? It's gone.
Yep.
So you cannot create that experience. If you're looking for very seamless, integrated experience across the company, you have to have the integrated systems. You cannot do that unless you have the infrastructure that is going to provide that centralized experience.
I think that's such a great point. A lot of times, at least in worlds that we travel in from a digital marketing, digital commerce perspective, when people talk about customer experience or a digital experience, people think about brand and creative, which is an important piece of customer experience, absolutely. But to your point, Sam, you really can't pull off that great experience if you don't have that centralized inventory, accounting, business systems in place to really drive and ensure people can self-serve in a way that is accurate, timely, great information that you're providing as a part of the process. I would love to hear some of your stories about like specifics of where you've seen that to play out, good or bad.
Yeah, so I will tell you some stories, and I'm actually going to tell you one story related to overall the inventory misalignment, and then the second story I'm going to tell you about the overarching focus or the overemphasis on the branding and messaging, and not really aligning the operational infrastructure to be able to serve those promises. So the way I like to think about sales and marketing is, hey, you are making a promise to the customer, but once you make the promise, it is your responsibility to deliver on those promises. So one of the stories that I am going to tell you is one of the e-commerce player. They are in a commodity space. They sell, let's say, $200 product, okay, $200 to $500 product, and their promise to the customer from the branding perspective is, I am going to get back to you every 20 minutes. You never have to wait for more than 20 minutes anytime you have a problem. Now, that's a tall promise. Okay, you really want to think about before making these promises. So in their case, obviously they were not as big. Their technology was not as aligned. Now, 20 minutes is a very short time frame. It takes 20 minutes for Jared, I, and you to talk and discuss before I can provide the pricing, I can provide the discount. When you are going to have those siloed departments inside the organization, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, because I don't know what is happening in your world. I cannot commit to my customer before I talk to you. So my response time is going to be 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 2 days. I don't know. Now, in their case, obviously, they made a tall promise that, 20 minutes from marketing, branding, you come to the site, but then you get the reviews. So people are going to read everything. People are smart nowadays. The consumers are smart. So they go to reviews, and none of the reviews are saying that I have never been able to find the response from these guys in 20 minutes. So you fall flat on your face.
Yes.
Irrespective of how sexy your marketing or branding is, right? So this is just one story that I'm telling you more from the alignment of, hey, you don't want to over promise, you don't want to over communicate. That's sales and marketing and operational. The second example that I am going to tell you about the overall misalignment of the organization. Amazing company, roughly $200 million. They grew overnight. They were at roughly $40 million. Acquired a lot of different brands, from the market. Became $200 million overnight. Okay, there were a lot of challenges overall from the business alignment perspective. The guys who actually did the M&A deal, they didn't realize how different their business was. Okay, so initially when they were slightly more traditional distribution business, they had an ERP system that was slightly more manufacturing centric. Okay, in the traditional distribution business, the manufacturing centric ERP could work. But now, when you acquire really cool kid from your neighborhood, then you need the newer tools in your basket. So
Yeah.
these guys acquired because see, the company was growing, fancy startup, new cool kids. They are going to come and going to make a lot of money for us. Okay, they acquired these guys. They were on very fancy new ERP system that you are going to hear in the market. They had, significantly good e-commerce system. I'm not going to name any brand there. Okay, but they had really cool infrastructure overall. But when you tie these two things together, when the old person and the new person comes together, that's when the real problem is going to be. So what they had to do is, before this, it was all back end sort of operations. None of the sales did not really use the ERP system. Can you believe their CFO did not use the ERP system?
Okay. Oh, no.
CFOs are supposed to be driving the ERP initiative. Okay, so their ERP system was an IT system. Anytime you need data or information, you ask your IT guy, they are going to do it. The only thing they were doing is they were entering some sales orders. Can you believe this? Okay, so they did not even have the total entry of the sales. Sometimes they'll simply make the GL entries. Okay, you sold for $10,000 or $100,000. I'm simply going to make a GL entry in my ERP system. So when they acquired these guys, now they have to create the same experience that the e-commerce business had. For that, they required the centralized inventory. Now, these guys could not do that because then that would require integrating all of these systems and really aligning all of the departments together, which was a political game. When you acquire new companies, I mean, they are going to have very different culture, political forces. So in their case, what they did is they ended up doing fake inventory inside their e-commerce system. Can you believe this? Fake inventory. Okay, so they had all sort of issues. Their salespeople were selling products that were already allocated to their key customers, and key customers was calling that, where is my product? I've already sold. Who are you? I don't even recognize you. And by the way, this is the guy who's actually paying 60% of the revenue, 50% of the revenue. Can you believe this? I mean, how disheartening that is going to be for a customer when you are expecting, even if it is a small order, you are a key customer. You have 50% of revenue. So this is the story where they had tons and tons of, I can go in as much depth as you want, but oh my goodness, this was a fascinating story overall in terms of the misalignment and misalignment of the system, not planning enough how your processes are going to be in physical as well as digital before you sort of bring this new kid and feel that, what, today they are doing 20 million in revenue. If I buy them, I am so good. I've been in the market for the last 40 years. I am actually going to do 10x, from yesterday, and we are going to do so much business. Nothing happened. Everybody left in the organization. Most key people. It's a nightmare right now.
The story is a really good one. I think we certainly see several organizations who have increased needs around thinking through technology, architecture planning through acquisitions, like as a part of growth, and also to your point, like culture, people, how people work together. That plays an important role in this too. I mean, we're talking about technology, but part of having technology work effectively for you is also having people work effectively together to plan how the technology is going to work together well for you. So a really great example of what to avoid.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm going to just reiterate what I said above. If you can't hear the passion in Sam's voice about these problems he's solving, man, I'm telling you, you need to go follow his stuff on LinkedIn, because I'm loving this. Thank you, Sam. I'd love to address a question that came from the audience, and this is something that we hear often, and I'm guessing you do too, Sam. So the question was, one of the biggest questions that I'm asked is how to get started selling online, but integrating into an exhausting ERP. So I'm assuming that, based on the way that was written, is that they're looking for some recommendations on how they approach this project, knowing that their ERP is going to present problems down the road.
So yeah, so my recommendation is going to be slightly different in this specific scenario. Let's say if you are simply trying to start on the e-commerce journey when your ROI is not really proven, you don't really understand how the e-commerce market works. How I would position it, I always like to go back to basics. Okay, that's how I like to think, because I grew up in a very manufacturing and distribution centric environment. We didn't have digital technology back then. Okay, so when when we had to start, I mean, we had to start from the basics, right? So here, let's say if somebody is doing a journey in a new venture, what they should be doing is first figure out a system for your physical process. And I am emphasizing here there's something called system even in your physical process, which means there's going to be method to the madness. Okay, that's how I like to define things. So for example, in this specific case, let's say if you are starting your e-commerce journey, forget about the integration, forget about the tech stuff right from the get-go. Prove the market first. Prove that you can sell the products in that market and you can prove profitably. Then figure out, okay, what do I need to do to scale this? When you are at a point where you are going to be scaling, okay, that's when technology is going to be a real help for you. If you try to do the technology first and then not able to sell, next time you are going to go to your CFO, they are never going to cut you a check.
Yeah, great advice.
Great
I mean,
point.
really, yeah, all about really. I mean, what I hear you talking about, Sam, is what we often talk to people about, like focusing on your MVP, your minimum viable product. Like, how can you get started in a small way that you can expand on later? Test and measure, and to your point, like validate that this channel is going to work for you, and learn some things, prove that you're going to make money at it, and then use that to fund those future improvements that you need to make on your tech stack. So really good.
Right, but one of the things I'm again going to be emphasizing it, even if you are small, even if you are testing a pilot, even if you are trying to do the MVP, do not go crazy. Create a system around it. And when I say system does not need to be technology. Okay, system are the written requirements that you follow on a daily basis without any deviations. Okay, so when I say system, have some method around whatever you are doing. So let's say, you should not be doing e-commerce in this way. Today, I am selling a widget, and tomorrow I am going to be selling a boat. If you are going to be doing that, you will not be in the business for very long, to be honest. Okay, so create the processes that are going to be scalable in the physical sense first before incorporating digital. Digital is all about the automation. Once you have enough volume, when your people cannot handle things, then you incorporate your digital aspect to the problem, but not from the get-go. Just create the MVP, as you mentioned, Laurie. Whatever is good enough just to get going.
Yeah, your clarification is really good though, because you're right. MVP, some people, you might interpret that to be your technology MVP, but to your point, it's really about defining your processes. And I know in our prep, Sam, you shared a story about an organization who physically changed where inventory was located to support ensuring they had inventory to fulfill on their e-commerce orders, and it didn't disrupt other inventory, right? So even if it's as simple as physical changes, processes, communication, or I shouldn't say simple as, but starting there. Maybe that's not simple, but it's the right place to start.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to touch on that story because that's really important. And when we talk about these, technology implementation, digital transformation implementation, ERP implementation, we are always hearing these negative stories. But what I like to highlight is some positives as well. So in this specific case, I mean, there was no digital, to be honest. Okay, like zero digital investment in the business. But if you look at their business, they had created almost like an ERP. They had very governed processes in the physical sense. If you look at their business, every employee knew everything that was going to happen in that. And the best example of this business is going to be if you go to a very well organized library, you don't have to think. You just go there, things just happen. And you just feel that, my goodness, this library is so amazing for some reason. It's not that they have a lot of digital processes there. They have well organized system, well-defined processes before they can implement anything digital. So this specific business, I mean, if you look at their markers, oh my goodness, like the floor markers and the labels and the way they coordinated, the way they communicated, everything was well communicated, well documented. Everybody has super visibility. So when we go there, you know what? I can implement your ERP in 30 days, 60 days, because you already have those things documented. But in the regular situation, when we go to, let's say, businesses, they don't even know what payment terms they are using in the business. Okay, I'm asking, okay, tell me your payment terms. What do you have? And they are going to, okay, let me find in my invoices. I'm gonna go through my 10,000 invoices that I signed in 1 year in the reams of paper, and I'm actually going to find all of the payment terms that you need to configure in your ERP system.
So I'd love to take it a step further from, so when we were addressing the question that came from the audience before, if we were to say, all right, organizations out there who have identified their market, established that they can sell in it successfully, they've taken that next step and implemented an ERP, and then architected them in a way that their ERP and e-commerce solutions are architected well together.
Yeah.
What are the things that they can do that they couldn't do before, and how would that impact their bottom line?
So one of the things, let's say if you are, let's say, creating a new channel that has a lot of volume, right? And if you are going to do that in the physical sense, obviously you are going to run into a lot of issues. Again, going back to my point about, how you are going to have the sense of inventory that you need to supply to your new channel. For example, let's say if it is a store, you need to know how many products are there to be able to, sell to your customer. So obviously you are not going to have that insight. You have created a workaround for the time being until you actually test your market. But once you test your market, your goal needs to be to create that scalable infrastructure. And that is going to be, okay, how can I take, how can I integrate my e-commerce to my ERP? First, obviously, your goal is always going to be to improve that customer experience. But you cannot improve the customer experience unless, all of these things are integrated. But what you need to do is you need to take the incremental steps. So first thing what you could do is you could probably take one integration scenario that could be, hey, you know what, today I'm actually going to take just sales order and going to take my that to my ERP system. So at least I have one workflow integrated. Once you do that, the next step is going to be, maybe I can initially, maybe you can have fake inventory. I don't know. I'm not trying to suggest here, but maybe you want to do that. Okay. But then once you get to a point where you are able to have the real-time visibility of the inventory, because that is going to solve a lot of problems in your organization, to be honest. So then the next thing you could do is probably the inventory feed. So overall, from the integration perspective, your end goal is obviously going to be, hey, if everything is super integrated with your ERP system and e-commerce system, and if you have a CRM system, if everything is integrated, that's the end goal. But you need to take the incremental approach to get there.
We're talking about using technology to be more competitive and to make better business decisions. You hit on this earlier, that sometimes organizations really aren't, like the CFO who isn't even looking at their ERP, right? That they're not considering how technology could be a strategic tool for them and could offer a competitive advantage. So if a business executive recognizes their organization needs to make some changes to be more strategic about technology, what do you think? What changes should they be making? Like, what role should be driving that internally? Or maybe it's not a specific role, but how do you think they go through a process of changing to realize that they need to actually be more strategic with their technology?
So the way I like to think is, to be honest, I mean, I would love CFOs to drive this if they have a little bit of marketing background. Okay. If they have made cold calls in their life, to be honest, okay, they would understand how marketing works. And they would be able to talk to my sales guys and marketing guys and plan. But that is very rare, to be honest, for CFOs to have that marketing perspective, to have that customer experience perspective. So in my mind, who should be driving the ERP or this whole customer experience initiative? I always like to talk that it should be marketing. Okay, which is going to be a big red flag, because marketing very rarely drives ERP implementations. Okay, they very rarely are seen. I mean, if you talk about ERP system, everybody's gonna say, what, ERP? Some backend, ugly kid. I don't even understand what that person does in the backend. Yeah, so that's how ERP systems are seen. But ERP system is your strategy. If you don't have the integrated, and by the way, this is not just related to ERP. An average corporation need 5 systems, okay, at a very minimum. Let's say if you look at the e-commerce shop, you cannot run your business if you're an e-commerce shop. You have to have e-commerce. Okay, you are not going to implement your e-commerce processes in your ERP. So you need e-commerce. You most likely need ERP. You most likely need a WMS. system if your warehouse is going to be significantly bigger. So all of these systems need to work together depending upon how sophisticated your processes are. But to answer your question, who should be driving the transformation? In my mind, whoever is responsible for customer experience. Okay, customer experience is never just marketing. It's never just branding. It's never just messaging. It's everything. Okay, so the person who has the most cross-functional responsibility or the understanding of how different world works together, they are the ones, and typically that's going to be the CEO, in my opinion. If the CEO has enough background, enough understanding of how accounting works, how marketing works, how sales works, then they would be very strategic in their thinking, how I can lay all these pieces. And there are executives and they really drive these things. So in short, I think it should be marketing, but typically it's really the supply chain operations or the finance that typically drive the transformation.
Yeah, great feedback, and I think just points back to the earlier conversation we were having about cross-functional teams. And I know Gartner research, we spent a lot of time with them and talk about CIOs now who are really needing to move into a more strategic role for organizations. When organizations are ready to think that way, and to your point, Sam, it requires the right kind of person who has that experience and really thinks about customer experience.
Well, we are at time, but I would love to take a minute or two, Sam, for you to tell us more about your book and your organization. Can you share a little bit more about those things?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Elevate IQ is in the business of helping companies select different systems. We get involved in the pre-technology selection phase, where our role is going to be to help companies understand what tools and technologies they are going to be needing to drive that cross-functional initiative that they might be hoping to get from the corporation. It could be simple process changes. It could be some of the business changes that they need to make, or just aligning different data structures to map that with the new solution, aligning the architecture and the roadmap overall. So we get involved in that. We do a lot of system integration, a lot of work when companies acquire their TMS to be talking to ERP, WMS to be talking to ERP, any possible combinations that you can think from the enterprise architecture. We get involved in all of that. Our average engagement is going to be roughly 5 to 6 different systems they are going to have in the enterprise architecture. And we are really trying to draw the boxes on a piece of paper that this is how your interaction should be. So just from the business perspective, we do selection, we do integration, we do implementation and training as well on many different systems. ERP, e-commerce is definitely our core as well.
Excellent. Once again, I'd highly recommend giving Sam a follow on LinkedIn, as well as he's producing so much great content. Thank you, Sam, for taking the time to join us today.
It's been great.
This was wonderful, and we will be following up with the recording and some additional content from there. So thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic day. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, guys. Super fun.